So the time has come, and I'm finally going to talk about the new PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox Series X1, I don't know, the new Xbox. But before I get into this video, I want to go ahead and remind all those console fanatics out there who are going to defend to the death their brand of choice. I don't participate in the console wars. I will buy both gaming consoles and I will play all of the exclusives that are on those available gaming consoles. That's just who and what I am. I don't really... So I wanted to start off talking about the controllers because just a couple of hours ago we got our first look at the new PlayStation 5 controller. And people are very torn on this. A lot of people are making the obvious comparison that this looks a lot less like a DualShock controller and a lot more like an Xbox controller, which is pretty much standard these days. I mean, most gaming controllers do tend to look about like this. I mean, when you do a comparison to this generation's controllers, you got the Xbox One X's very excellent controller. You've got the DualShock, which is very, very different. You've got the Nintendo Elite controller, which is almost, I mean, verbatim, exactly the same with its exclusive features, of course, but exactly the same modeled after the Xbox One X. So now it looks like PlayStation has decided to join in and do their version of this basic controller. So with that said, even though it does fit that basic form that we all expect a controller to look like these days and less like a DualShock, it does have a lot of the features you would expect from a PlayStation controller. It's got the share button, it's got that touch-sensitive pad, it's got the built-in speaker, and it still has the light bar, except the light bar has been moved to now it's front-facing. I kind of wish they ditched the light bar for this generation. I didn't particularly care for that. But I guess if it's not as bright, I guess if it's not as distracting, and this is a much better placement for it, I guess that's going to be fine. Taking a look at the side view, it's a pretty decent controller for sure. I do get why people, including myself, are dunking on it on Twitter because it looks so much like an Xbox controller, so it does take away one of those unique things about the PlayStation away, but it kind of makes sense that they just wanted to join in on what everybody else is already doing. So taking a look at the new Xbox controller, I guess they went with if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They did make some minor changes between the Xbox One X controller, though. They did go with this nice hybrid D-pad, which I like quite a bit. They had this on the Elite controller, and it was very, very popular. A much better D-pad, I think. Then they went ahead and went with a share button, which makes sense because the Nintendo Switch has a share button, the PlayStation's had a share button, so they're stealing that idea for their new controller as well. I do think it's interesting that it does still use batteries, and I know a lot of people are dunking on that, but they give you the option to use batteries. You get a charge and play kit, or if you buy a controller that has a built-in cradle, or you buy a third-party rechargeable battery with a cradle, it works just like a PlayStation controller anyway. So I've always seen the option for batteries as a bonus rather than a negative. If your rechargeable battery goes out, instead of having to charge and put it down for a little while or connect it to a cord, you always change the batteries out if you want to. That's an option you have so you can continue playing. Honestly, I don't have a problem with the battery system, but the Xbox controller is exactly what I would have expected it to be, plus a share button. But ignoring the controllers, the most important thing, I think, for most gaming consoles is the specs. And people are mostly interested in the exclusives, yes, but the specs and see how good that system is going to run third-party games. And here's where PlayStation really has a problem. Their system seems, on paper, to be a lot more powerful than the Series X's. You take a look at the CPU, and you've got 8 cores on both, except the Series X is set to 3.8. As opposed to PlayStation 5, which is set to 3.5 with variable frequency, 3.5 being the maximum. You look at the GPU, and you got 12 teraflops being put out by the GPU in the Xbox Series X. The PlayStation 5 is putting out 10.28, and that's a pretty significant difference. This puts PlayStation at a pretty severe disadvantage for this generation because a lot of people who are only going to buy one console in a generation or their first console in a generation, they're going to choose the console that has the best graphical output for third-party games. They want it to look and run as well as humanly possible. And in this case, it looks like the Series X is going to be the more powerful machine. So I think a lot of people are going to adapt it. Now, there's been exceptions to that rule. The PlayStation 3 was a much more powerful system, but since it was so much more expensive, nobody wanted to buy it. And that's one of the reasons that PlayStation 3 lost that generation. Provided the Xbox is relatively close to the same price as the PlayStation 5, I think you're going to see a lot of people pick it over the PlayStation. Of course, exclusives are going to be a big part of that as well, but when you're picking up your first console of a generation or your only console for a generation, a lot of people are going to choose the better system in terms of graphics. Going back to the specs one more time, almost everything else is identical with the exception of the storage drives. And it looks like the PlayStation has a slightly smaller storage drive, but they are promising that they have a proprietary SSD that's supposed to be lightning fast. This will be the first gaming console generation with standard SSDs. And as somebody who's had SSDs on his PCs now for, 6-7 years, there's nothing like it. There's almost no load time on my PCs. Compare that to my gaming consoles, and man, I'm just so sick of load time. So it looks like both consoles in this generation will eradicate that. PlayStation's promising a faster load time, so we'll have to wait and see. And that's not to say that the PlayStation 5 will be a bad choice. It obviously is going to still look very, very good at 10 teraflops. That is a very powerful machine with a very decent GPU and 8 cores. So it's going to get the job done, absolutely. So I think a lot of PlayStation fans and fanatics will probably stick with their brand. Going back to the specs one more time, almost everything else is identical with the exception of the storage drives. And it looks like the PlayStation has a slightly smaller storage drive, but they are promising that they have a proprietary SSD that's supposed to be lightning fast. This will be the first gaming console generation with standard SSDs. And as somebody who's had SSDs on his PCs now for, 6-7 years, there's nothing like it. There's almost no load time on my PCs. Compare that to my gaming consoles, and man, I'm just so sick of load time. So it looks like both consoles in this generation will eradicate that. PlayStation's promising a faster load time, so we'll have to wait and see. But what really sells a console for me is exclusive games, and PlayStation is poised to be very strong at this point because they have some blockbuster franchises like God of War and Last of Us and Horizon Zero Dawn and other games that just people desperately will want sequels to and will buy a console to play the sequel. If I didn't own a PlayStation 5 and God of War 2 got announced, I would buy that immediately. So I feel like absolutely they're in a very strong position where Xbox has sucked when it comes to franchises. They've got Halo launching on the next generation, but what else? Microsoft really hurt for exclusives in this last generation, and as it stands right now, we don't have a lot of announced games. Obviously, there will probably be a new Gears of War. There's definitely Halo Infinite. There's the Hellblade game that has been announced for it as well. But we don't really know what Xbox is creating to sell consoles. And most of the games, the exclusives that they create, also end up on PC now these days as well. So instead of buying an Xbox, you can always buy a PC of your choice and have it run Windows 10 and then play those games on Windows 10. But that doesn't mean the Xbox One X won't have more exclusives. Keep in mind, they did go on a crazy buying spree, buying up, 5 major studios: Undead Labs, who made State of Decay; Playground Games, who made Forza Horizon; Ninja Theory, who made Hellblade; and Compulsion Games, which made We Happy Few. They probably will announce a bunch of exclusives before the end of the year to help sell Xbox Series X's. Then another deciding factor to take a look at is always price, like we saw during the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 generation. But in this case, it looks like analysts are calling for the Series X to run about $499 and the PlayStation 5 to sell for about $499. $500 is pretty expensive for most people, especially what's considering going on in the world today. But that said, unless one of these companies chooses to take a huge loss on these devices, you can expect them to come out at about $500, and it won't be a big factor in deciding which console to buy. But probably the biggest deciding factor, I think, for this console generation and why these generation may not even sell any consoles at all is, of course, Google Stadia. Because with Google Stadia, you don't have to buy a console. I tried to say that with a straight face. Oh, I'm sorry, Google. So my takeaway from all of this is very simple. I think the consoles are very, very similar. Obviously, the Xbox has a much more powerful system, but Microsoft has a much worse reputation. And with this next generation, backwards compatibility is going to be a big deal. So people will want to sell their PlayStation 4s, buy a PlayStation 5, hoping that their digital library and their physical library still works on the PlayStation 5. Obviously, that's how Xbox will work as well, but a lot of people don't have physical or digital games from this Xbox One generation to translate over. I think that could be a huge discussion factor, as well as Game Pass versus PlayStation Now, their streaming services, their subscription services. All of that's going to make a big difference, but I think this generation doesn't have a clear leader yet. If Xbox wants to fight this uphill battle, they're going to need clear, powerful exclusives that launch as part of the launch lineup to sell that system. And personally, I feel like PlayStation has been resting on its laurels for a while, and I think they just assume people who bought the PlayStation 4 will also buy the PlayStation 5. I don't feel they started off on the right foot here. Definitely when it comes to the hardware choices, it's not the better system. They need to also bring those exclusive launch titles, and they need to be incredible if they want to continue to sell consoles and continue to lead it. I would expect this generation, right now, based on this, I think Xbox is going to play catch up a little bit, and I would expect it to be split almost 50-50, which probably means we're going to have another horrible console war on YouTube and in the comments section. Please don't. Please don't. And I guess I do have a bias towards Xbox for this generation, mostly because I feel like they really got beat up on the last generation, and I want them to compete with PlayStation. I think having Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox all selling gaming consoles, all producing exclusives, creates a very good environment for the consumer and for the gamers. I want Xbox to continue to be a strong competitor, so I'm hoping that they will do well with this generation. I don't care if they win. I just want to make sure that they are staying afloat and keep producing games and keep producing products for people to buy, so it keeps PlayStation and Nintendo on their toes, doing their best to come up with good games at good prices for the consumer. Microsoft, though, if you want to earn that position back, you gotta earn it, and I hope you do. Now, this is all just one man's opinion. I could be wrong, and I know if I am, or if I'm right, you're gonna let me know in that comment section below. While you're down there, drop a like on this video. It's very important because it lets me know that I'm doing a good job. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, I hope that you are. Hit that notification bell so you can know when these videos goes live, because if you watch the video quickly, you can help my videos succeed, and I hope that you do. Guys, as always, thanks for watching. I love you very much, and I'll speak with you again soon.